Evelina stood beneath the unforgiving blaze of the chandeliers, feeling the heat of 100 eyes upon her. Almack's glittered like a kingdom of crystal and silk, but to her it felt like a gallows. Moments earlier, Lord Ashcombe, elegant, adored, and cruel in the way only the privileged could be, had stepped back from her with a disdainful smile, announcing to anyone who cared to listen that he had no intention of shackling himself to a woman so desperate for attention. The hum of conversation had paused long enough for the insult to land. A single, sharp silence. Then the whispers rushed in like a rising tide. She did not weep. Viscount Harrow's daughter would never humiliate herself further. Yet her throat felt scraped raw, as though her dignity had been torn from her with invisible claws. She lifted her chin, an instinct more than a decision, because she had been raised to endure storms with grace. Still, her pulse betrayed her, thrumming violently beneath the pearls at her throat. The musicians continued playing, but even their elegant notes seemed to recoil from her disgrace. Ladies fanned themselves with sudden fervor, stealing glances over painted feathers. Gentlemen shifted, pretending not to stare while drinking in every detail. The season thrived on scandal, and tonight Evelina had unwittingly offered the finest entertainment. Her reputation, so carefully preserved through years of obedience, now dangled by a thread before a room eager to watch it snap. Her mother approached with a stiff smile stretched too wide, as though it alone could hide the catastrophe. "Evelina, my dear, let us take a moment of air," she murmured through clenched teeth. But even as she spoke, Lord Ashcombe sauntered away, laughing lightly with his companions, entirely at ease after dismantling her future with a single public gesture. The rejection was grand enough that no gentleman would dare court her now, not with Ashcombe's words echoing through the ballroom like a curse. Evelina walked toward the nearest pillar, careful and composed, though each step felt as if she waded through cruel, invisible fog. Her heart thudded painfully, but she would not give the tongue the satisfaction of seeing how deeply she had been wounded. The polished floor reflected her ghostly expression, her pale silk gown shimmering like an apology she could not utter. She clasped her gloved hands tightly, feeling the faint tremor she prayed no one else could see. Her father arrived moments later, his face carved with fury and helplessness. Viscount Harrow was no great political force, no influential lord capable of crushing Ashcombe with a word. His standing was modest, his purse strained. One scandal of this magnitude could undo them entirely. "We leave at once," he muttered, offering his arm. His voice held no anger toward her, only dread for what tomorrow's gossip sheets would unleash. She took his arm, though her fingers trembled against the polished fabric. As they moved toward the exit, fragments of conversation slithered around them. Poor girl. Unfortunate. What did she expect? Each whisper pierced deeper than the last, but Evelina forced herself forward. The great double doors loomed ahead, their gilded frames mocking her retreat. She imagined Ashcombe's smirk behind her, satisfied with the ruin he had orchestrated. Outside, the night offered no comfort. Carriages rattled along King Street, lanterns flickering against the drizzle-slicked stones. The air smelled of damp horsehair and disappointment. Evelina inhaled sharply, trying to steady herself. The humiliation would not end here. By morning, London would feast upon it. She stepped into the carriage, hands folded tightly in her lap, as though she might hold herself together by sheer will. Her mother sat opposite her, unusually silent. The Viscount joined them, shutting the door with a grim finality. The horses jolted forward. For a long moment, no one spoke. The familiar rhythm of wheels on cobblestone filled the void, a steady reminder that the world continued turning even as hers crumbled. She wondered if she should apologize, beg forgiveness, promise to disappear quietly into the country. But the words stuck, trapped by the ache swelling within her chest. Her father finally broke the silence. "It will be discussed," he said. "We shall find a solution. You will not be left adrift." Yet his tone revealed how few options he truly possessed. Evelina nodded. She wanted to believe him, but reality pressed sharply against her like a cold blade. The ton was merciless, and unmarried daughters were currency. Tonight she had lost her value in their unforgiving market. At last the carriage halted before their modest townhouse. Evelina stepped out into the weak lamplight, the drizzle feathering her cheeks like icy fingertips. She paused on the threshold, breathing through the tightness coiling inside her. Tomorrow everything would change. Tomorrow would decide her fate. There was a haunting sense she hovered at the edge of some unseen precipice, her life tilting into a future she had never imagined. What she did not know, what she could not yet imagine, was that somewhere far from London's glittering cruelty, a man with a scarred face and a soldier's haunted silence would soon be bound to her by duty, honor, and a marriage neither had sought. And in the quiet shadows of that union, her heart would learn to beat again in ways she had never dared dream, discovering strength in vulnerability and hope in the most unexpected of places. She stepped inside her home, letting the door close softly behind her. That night, beneath the muted glow of a single candle, she lay awake, dread curling like smoke through her thoughts, yet curiosity flickering. In the quiet hours before dawn, she rose and stood by her window, watching the pale sky lighten with grace. Each breath steadied her as she faced the uncertain day ahead. She knew society's judgment would be swift and merciless, yet somewhere within her, a fragile flicker of resilience stirred, urging her to endure whatever destiny awaited beyond the horizon. She would endure with courage. The morning after Evelina's disgrace arrived with merciless clarity. London awoke eager for gossip, and by the time the sun burned through the fog, her name had already threaded through drawing rooms like a cautionary tale. Evelina sat in the small morning parlor, hands clasped tightly in her lap, listening to the muffled footsteps of her parents pacing behind closed doors. Their hushed voices seeped through the walls in anxious tones, each word a reminder that she had become the center of a storm no one in her family had the power to calm. Her father entered at last, his expression weary but determined. She rose instinctively, though her knees felt unsteady. "Evelina," he began, choosing his words with painful care, "London is cruel. They will not let this matter rest." His gaze softened. "You deserve better than to be torn apart in parlors and printed sheets. We must secure your future before society decides it for you." She nodded, though dread coiled inside her like living ice. "What must I do, father?" He hesitated only a moment. "There is someone you must meet." A carriage waited outside, its lacquered surface dulled by the lingering mist. The journey wound through quieter streets until they stopped near an unassuming townhouse in Mayfair, a residence that bore none of London's fashionable elegance. Evelina sensed something solemn in the air, something weighted with unspoken history. Her father did not offer further explanation, merely escorted her to the door and knocked. The man who opened it was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the controlled stillness of someone who had witnessed violence. His dark hair was tied neatly at the nape of his neck, and a leather patch covering his right eye offered the first jarring contrast to his otherwise impeccable appearance. Evelina's breath caught, not out of fear, but from the unexpected nobility in his stance. He bowed with perfect formality. "Your Grace," her father said quietly, "thank you for receiving us." "I keep my promises," the man replied, his voice low, steady, and unadorned. His remaining eye, gray as winter seas, lifted to Evelina. "Lady Evelina, I am Greyford." The name struck her with a force she did not show. The Duke of Greyford. Whispers of him drifted through London like smoke, rumors of heroism, tragedy, and solitude. He had fought in the peninsula, lost an eye at Salamanca, and afterward withdrawn from society entirely. Many feared him, many pitied him, few knew him. Evelina curtsied, her composure delicate but unbroken. "Your Grace, I thank you for granting us this audience." He studied her more intently than any man ever had, not with the idle scrutiny of a suitor, but with the careful consideration of someone assessing her very soul. At last he stepped aside. "Please, let us speak privately." Her father squeezed her hand before she entered the dimly lit study. Greyford closed the door gently behind them. Despite her nerves, Evelina sensed no danger, only an aura of loneliness that radiated from him like an unspoken confession. He gestured for her to sit. "I shall not waste your time, my lady. Your father once saved my life. I owe him a debt I have never had cause to repay, until now." Evelina held her breath. "London will not forgive what Lord Ashcombe has done to you," he continued. "Not because you are unworthy, but because they are eager to consume whatever spectacle they are given." His tone remained measured, almost clinical, but there was a faint edge beneath it, a quiet fury not directed at her. "Your reputation is in danger of being destroyed. And so, I offer a solution." He paused long enough that she felt the weight of the moment settle around them. "I offer marriage." Her heartbeat stumbled. Though she had expected something grave, nothing prepared her for the bluntness of his proposal. He watched her without flinching. "I do not expect affection. I do not demand companionship. I offer you my name, my protection, and the shelter of Greyford's honor." She searched his face for mockery or pity, but found neither. Only earnest sincerity, carved into features sharpened by sorrow. "Your Grace," she whispered, "I know nothing of you." "That is easily remedied," he replied. "But understand, I am not what London expects of a duke. I do not attend balls, I do not charm ladies, and I do not indulge in court gossip. My life is quiet, ordered, and solemn. You may find such a life unsuited to your upbringing." She shook her head. "Quiet does not frighten me." His lone eye softened, almost imperceptibly. "Then consider this. Marrying me will silence London. They may mock the duke who hides from society, but they will not dare challenge the honor of my house. You will be restored." "And you?" she asked softly. He hesitated, as though weighing whether to reveal a truth or conceal it. "I do not seek restoration, only peace." The silence between them grew tender rather than cold. Evelina sensed a life carved by duty, loss, and restraint. There was nothing monstrous about him, only wounded strength. She understood the offer for what it truly was, not a transaction of convenience, but an act of honor from a man who had been shaped by war and isolation. "I will not pressure you," he said. "If you refuse, I shall not speak of this meeting again. Your choice remains your own." Evelina closed her eyes briefly. She pictured Almack's, Ashcombe's disdain, society's cruelty, and the tightening noose of gossip that threatened to choke her future. Then she pictured this man, scarred, solitary, yet steadfast, offering her the one thing London had denied her, dignity. She opened her eyes. "Yes, Your Grace. I accept." For a moment, he did not speak. A subtle shift in his expression, surprise, relief, glimmered before he bowed his head. "Then I am in your debt once more, my lady." Her lips parted. "I believe we are equal in that regard." Before the hour had passed, arrangements were made. A quiet ceremony, immediate departure from London, and a future tethered to a man she barely knew yet somehow trusted. As Evelina stepped back into the carriage beside her father, she looked once more at the townhouse door. Greyford stood there, watching, unreadable in the shadowed light. She was struck by a chilling thought, one that burned with fear and fragile hope. Her life had been shattered in a single night, and yet something within her whispered that stepping into Greyford's world might piece her together in ways she had never imagined. The carriage rolled forward, carrying her toward a marriage born not of love, but of necessity, and perhaps something gentler waiting beneath it, unseen. Evelina awoke the next morning to the muted glow of a Northumberland dawn, its pale light filtering through velvet drapes that seemed older than memory itself. A quiet stillness wrapped the chamber, heavy with the unfamiliar but oddly comforting scent of cedar and hearth smoke. For a moment she lay unmoving, suspended between the remnants of an anxious night and the tentative calm that followed it. The Duke's restrained kindness had unsettled her more profoundly than cruelty would have. Kindness left her with questions, dangerous, delicate questions, about who he truly was beneath the scarred exterior London so readily whispered about. She sat up, letting the sheets fall softly from her shoulders. In the faint mirror across from her, the woman reflected back appeared slightly altered, as though confusion and fragile anticipation had woven themselves into her features during the night. She wondered whether he had slept at all. She wondered whether he had felt the same odd shift within himself as she had. A knock at the door, a light, respectful sound, interrupted the silence. Mrs. Harrowby, the housekeeper, entered with a curtsy, offering a tray of tea, bread, and early berries. Her manner was warm but careful, as though handling a guest of high rank who had yet to understand her own place. Evelina sensed an entire household holding its breath, waiting to see what sort of lady she might become. Yet beneath that, she caught a flicker of hope, the same hope servants carried when a long, lonely master finally gained companionship. The Duke requests that, if it suits you, my lady, you join him for a morning tour of the grounds, Mrs. Harrowby said, her voice as soft as wool. He asks only that you dress warmly. The wind is sharp today. The message was simple. The invitation was not. It was a gesture, an opening of a door few claimed he ever unlocked. Evelina thanked her, dressed in a walking gown of deep plum wool, and wrapped a cloak around her shoulders. As she stepped into the corridor, she found the Duke waiting at the staircase landing. He bowed his head at her appearance. Though his posture was straight, she sensed the slight tension in his stance, the faint worry of a man unused to hosting a woman he wished to impress. His remaining eye, startlingly blue, startlingly alive, softened at the sight of her. If the weather proves too bracing, Lady Greyford, you need only speak and we shall return, he said with formality, though warmth threaded beneath the words. I shall manage well enough, she replied. I should like to see the grounds. He offered his arm. She hesitated only a breath before placing her hand upon it. They descended the stairs together, passing through quiet halls lined with ancestral portraits whose solemn expressions watched their every step. Outside, the wind swept across the moor, tugging at Evelina's cloak, but the Duke placed his gloved hand gently above hers, securing their connection. They walked along a stone path that curved toward the western gardens. The land stretched out vast and untamed, a rugged beauty that mirrored the man beside her, scarred, windswept, formidable, and unexpectedly gentle in its silence. Evelina inhaled the wild scent of damp earth and heather. She had grown up in cultivated gardens, pruned hedges, and well-disciplined lawns. Nothing in London resembled this ungoverned majesty. This land saved my sanity, the Duke said quietly, as though responding to a thought she had not voiced aloud. When I returned from Salamanca, there was much noise in my head. Here, the wind drowned it out. Evelina glanced at him, unsure whether to offer sympathy or leave the moment untouched. He sensed her hesitation. You need not speak, he said. It is enough that you walk beside me. They continued in silence, passing an ancient yew that stretched its dark branches like outstretched arms. A family of starlings erupted from the branches, swirling into the sky. Evelina watched them rise, marveling at the image they formed against the clouds. They fly without fear, she murmured. Fear does not keep them grounded, he answered. It is the instinct to return home. His voice carried a strained note, hinting at the loneliness he had never dared confess. Evelina felt something shift inside her, an ache that was not pity but recognition. For years she had been measured and judged, raised to please society's cruel gaze. He had been cast into solitude by war and misfortune. Both had been surrounded by people, yet profoundly alone. They reached the old fountain at the heart of the garden. Its stone figures, weathered cherubs, and ivy-clad nymphs held bowls filled with frozen rainwater. Evelina brushed her fingers over the rim, feeling the cold seep into her skin. My mother loved this fountain, the Duke said. She believed it blessed marriages conducted within sight of its waters. Do you believe that as well? Evelina asked. He paused, looking down into the frost-silvered basin. I believe blessings are rare things, Lady Greyford. If one appears, I should not be so arrogant as to refuse it. Evelina's breath hitched, not from the cold, but from the unexpected sincerity threaded through his words. He turned toward her fully then, and for the first time she did not avert her eyes from his scar, not out of bravery, but out of tenderness. The mark did not frighten her. It humbled her, for in that moment she realized it was less a symbol of ruin than a testament to survival. "I know our marriage was forced upon you," he said, voice low, almost fragile. "I know you came to my house wounded by humiliation not of your own making. I offer you no extravagant promises, only honesty. Should you ever choose to trust me, you will never be made to feel small in my presence." Evelina's heart tightened. She felt the sting of tears, but not of sorrow, of relief, of possibility, of something precious and dangerous awakening between them. "I do not yet know what trust will look like," she whispered, "but I believe I can learn it with you." The wind eased. The clouds thinned. A shaft of pale sunlight slipped through, striking the fountain's edge and casting shimmering light across the Duke's profile. In that instant, Evelina no longer saw the feared recluse of London's cruel gossip. She saw a man who had lived through darkness and still chose gentleness. A man who offered safety not as a prison, but as a refuge. "Then we begin there," he said softly. The moment was fragile, suspended between confession and transformation, until a distant voice called from the manor's direction. Mrs. Harrowby approached at a hurried pace, her expression anxious. "My lord, my lady," she said breathlessly, "a messenger has arrived from London. The matter is delicate." The Duke stiffened. Evelina felt her newly found calm quake, for she sensed, with chilling clarity, that the past they both hoped to outrun had just crossed their threshold. Months passed at Greyford Hall, each day steeped in quiet revelation. The moors rolled endlessly beyond the windows, wind and rain shaping the landscape much as circumstance had shaped them, toughened, scarred, but alive with possibility. Evelina and the Duke had fallen into a rhythm, one built on small gestures rather than grand declarations. Tea poured at the same hour each morning, letters read aloud by firelight, walks along the frost-tipped paths where the Duke taught her to recognize the birds and plants native to the Northumberland hills. In these ordinary routines, a profound intimacy had grown, neither rushed nor forced, but undeniable. The Duke's scarred features, once a symbol of society's derision, had become markers of resilience and quiet nobility in her eyes. And hers, in turn, were no longer just a reflection of delicate beauty, but of courage tempered by suffering. One crisp morning, as frost rhymed the edges of the ancient yews, a courier arrived from London, mounted and breathless. Evelina, who had begun to feel herself at home in these quiet halls, felt a flutter of anxiety. She watched as the Duke broke the seal on the envelope with calm, deliberate hands, his expression unreadable. His single eye darkened briefly as he read, and then he refolded the letter, tucking it carefully into his waistcoat pocket. "They summon us to the Prince Regent's gathering," he said quietly. An invitation to attend Almack's once more. Evelina's pulse quickened. London, the very place of her public humiliation. Memories of Lord Ashcombe's disdain and the whispers that had trailed her for weeks rose unbidden. Yet, she saw something different in the Duke's stance. No fear, no hesitation, only the quiet command of a man who had endured far worse and yet retained his dignity. "You need not go if it troubles you," he offered, voice low but firm, and there was no condescension, only concern. She shook her head. "I must," she said, "if only to face what I could not before, and perhaps to see you recognized as the man I have come to know." Preparation for London was meticulous. Evelina's hair was arranged in intricate coils beneath a gown of deep sapphire, embroidered subtly with silver thread. The Duke, in tailored black, stood beside her with that same solemn grace, the patch over his eye as unyielding and dignified as ever. As they approached the assembly, gasps rippled through the crowd. Women who had whispered with scorn now regarded her with curiosity. Men who had smirked at her disgrace stared with cautious intrigue. Lord Ashcombe appeared, polished and self-assured, the very image of society's shallow perfection. He approached, expecting perhaps her embarrassment, perhaps a hesitant smile. Evelina, however, met his gaze with calm serenity. Beside her, the Duke's presence radiated strength and quiet authority. She no longer felt the tremor of fear that had gripped her months before. She had grown into herself, and into the space this man beside her had carved. "My lady," Ashcombe began, voice smooth, "I did not expect to see you here, so transformed." She inclined her head with a polite, measured grace. "Transformation is often found where one is least expected to seek it," she said softly. The words landed lightly, yet carried the weight of all the humiliation and resilience she had endured. The Duke placed a steadying hand at her elbow. "You honor me, Lady Evelina," he said, his single eye locking with hers, conveying the unspoken bond they shared. There was no arrogance, no display of dominance, only recognition, of partnership, of survival, of mutual respect. The night continued, the ballroom glittering, the chandeliers casting prisms across the polished floor. Whispers circulated, as always, but their tone had shifted. Curiosity replaced ridicule. Admiration replaced scorn. Evelina moved with measured confidence, laughter spilling from her lips without self-consciousness, her gestures guided by comfort rather than societal expectation. At last, Ashcombe, realizing his presence no longer commanded attention, attempted a closer approach. "Evelina," his voice faltered. The Duke's hand, gentle yet firm, rested upon her back, a silent assertion. "She owes you nothing," he said, voice low but carrying through the quiet space between them. "Neither apology nor affection. Her heart, her loyalty, her respect, all are hers to give, and she has given them freely." Evelina felt a shiver of warmth, not fear but admiration. The public declaration, subtle though it was, rendered the shallow grandeur of Ashcombe's world powerless. He retreated, leaving them alone in their quiet triumph. Later, as they returned to Greyford Hall beneath a sky streaked with violet and gold, Evelina's heart beat with a rhythm both familiar and new. The storm of London's judgment had passed, leaving only clarity. She looked upon the man beside her, not the feared recluse whispered about in hushed tones, but the gentle, steadfast soul who had claimed her trust and admiration, and who now held them as though they were treasures more precious than any jewel. That evening, the northern wind howling softly outside, they sat together by the fire. Evelina traced her fingers across the Duke's gloved hand. "I feared London would always haunt me," she admitted. "But with you I feel anchored." His remaining eyes softened, catching the flicker of flames. "And I," he replied, voice hushed, "have lived years in solitude, believing I could not belong. You have taught me that even the broken may find a haven." They lingered in silence, a silence filled with the weight of unspoken confessions and the delicate beauty of trust newly discovered. Outside, the hall seemed to exhale, walls and windows illuminated by firelight and moonbeam, enclosing them in a world where past shame could no longer reach them. The moors whispered against the glass, as if echoing the promise of steadfastness, endurance, and love finally realized. Evelina leaned forward, resting her head against his shoulder. "I believe," she whispered, "that we have found something London cannot touch. Something beyond whispers, beyond appearances. And we shall guard it," he murmured, placing a gloved hand over hers, pressing gently, deliberately. "For it is ours alone." The night deepened, but neither spoke further. Words were unnecessary. Their hearts, attuned through shared understanding and vulnerability, communicated all that required speech. The fire crackled softly, the hall exhaled warmth, and outside the wind continued its eternal song. Within that room, history, society, and misfortune had no power. Only the quiet, unassailable truth remained. Two wounded souls had discovered sanctuary in one another, and in that discovery found the peace, trust, and love that had long eluded them. And so, as the first hint of dawn crept across the moors, Evelina and the Duke remained entwined, not by duty or obligation, but by choice, recognition, and the fragile, enduring power of hearts brave enough to love despite past scars. Their story, once marked by public disgrace, now belonged to them alone, a testament to resilience, devotion, and the quiet triumph of intimacy over the cruel gaze of the world.